and oh, my laptop's dying. Okay, I gotta try to finish this video. Oh my God, I just realized the light's not on. You know what? No, I'm not gonna turn the light on. It's too far gone now. It's too far gone at this point. Okay. Okay. Hey, hello, my name is JoJo and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome. So today I'm gonna continue talking about some aspects of clinical psych PhD program interviews that I think would be helpful for you when you're practicing and preparing. This video is going to be part 2 of a 3-part series that I'm doing where each video focuses on a different type of interview that you may encounter during your interview season. My first video was on faculty interviews, so if you haven't checked that out already, I'm going to have it linked down in the description as well as probably somewhere up in one of these corners so that you can go ahead and watch that. Today's video is going to be covering student interviews, and then the third and final video on this topic is going to be about group interviews. In my first video about faculty interviews, I also went over just a more general overview of how interview days are typically structured. So if you have any questions about that, definitely go check out that video first. I feel like today's video might be a little bit on the shorter side, just because faculty interviews and student interviews are pretty similar. There are just a few differences that I've noticed while I was being interviewed that I'm gonna give some insight on that I think might be helpful to you. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so student interviews. As I mentioned in my first video, student interviews are typically conducted by current matriculated students in whatever program you are interviewing for. And similar to faculty interviews, they can last anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. I realized in my last video while I was editing that I said 45 minutes to an hour. It was a long day. I saw both of my clients on the day I filmed, and so 45 minutes to an hour was just like stuck in my head for some reason. But 30 to 45 minutes, that's how long interviews usually are. First things first. So I know you might be thinking, oh, I'm gonna be interviewing with another student. I can relax a little bit. I don't have to be so on edge. It'll be fine. Even though you might be feeling a little bit more at ease and a little more relaxed because you're not interviewing with a faculty member and it might seem a lot less stressful, now is not the time to let your guard down. Always, always, always remember that the student doing your interview is still evaluating you. They are not your friend. They are not your peer. Their purpose during the interview is to evaluate you and evaluate your fit for the program. However, with that in mind, you still want to be yourself. Just don't completely, fall into this relaxed demeanor that comes across as if you're like talking to your best friend or something. You want to stay professional. In my experience, student interviews fall a little bit more neatly into what you would expect from any interview. And they kind of more closely follow that standard ask, answer, next question type of approach that you're probably used to in interviews at this point. They will review your materials ahead of time. They will come with questions prepared to ask you, and they will ask them very directly. They also tend to ask the more, traditional interview questions that most people already kind of have answers prepared for, just based on the fact that they've been asked those questions in every interview they've ever been to. They ask those kinds of questions that you would kind of expect to be asked. For example, I just tried to jot down some questions from my student interviews that I went through. I'm almost 100% sure that this isn't all of them, but these are what I could remember. Some of the questions I remember being asked were just like, obviously the typical tell me about yourself. But then they also asked me, what made you decide to do a master's program prior to your PhD? Why do you want a PhD in clinical psychology? What attracted you to our school or program? What kind of research are you currently pursuing? What kind of research are you interested in pursuing? Are there any faculty members in particular that you're interested in working with? I see that you've done XYZ that you listed on your CV. Could you tell me more about that experience? Or I see that you've also done XYZ on your CV. What prompted you to pursue that? What would you consider your greatest strength and weakness? What are your long-term career goals? Just all of those very typical, predictable interview questions are usually what I got in my student interviews. Luckily for me, my mentor who was helping me prepare for my interviews at the time had already kind of given me the heads up that these are the kinds of questions I should be expecting. So I already had answers to all of these questions prepared and ready to go when they were asked. Like I mentioned in my last video, you do not need to have all of your answers perfectly memorized like a script. You really just want to be your natural self. So when you're preparing for your interviews, think about what you want to say in your answers, maybe make some notes and practice giving your answers in a way that comes off naturally and in a way that still hits all of your major points that you want to include in your response, but that doesn't sound like you're reading from a cue card. I kind of lucked out a little bit because my interviews were online. So what I did was I wrote down all of the potential questions that I could be asked in my notes app, as well as all of the main points that I wanted to hit in each of my answers. And I had it pulled up on the side of my screen during my interviews. And if the faculty member or student interviewing me asked a question that I knew I had written down and that I knew I had a prepared answer for, I would very, very slyly, as inconspicuously as I possibly could, would just scroll to that question in my notes app and would just have it like pulled up sitting there as I was responding, and I would kind of just glance at it every now and then to make sure that I was hitting my bullet points. Obviously, if your interviews are in person, this tip won't necessarily help you, but still, when practicing, just make sure to have a solid idea of what you want to say and all of the major points that you want to hit when you're answering, and practice delivering that response. In my experience, student interviews were definitely more intense than faculty interviews. They definitely felt more intense. I don't know, maybe I just got students who were super intense and intimidating, and maybe you'll get lucky and get some students who are just, I guess, a little bit more relaxed and less intense. I don't know how many times I've said that word in the past 30 seconds. But yeah, I mean, these students, I guess, generally just want to do a really good job of evaluating you and evaluating your fit for the program. And so they take these interviews very seriously. I don't really know what else to say about that. As the interview comes to a close, much like the faculty interview, the student will ask you if you have any questions for them. And again, your answer should always be yes. You can choose to ask them the same questions you asked the faculty member if it would be relevant to the student as well. You can choose to ask them different questions than the faculty member if you feel like the answer that you received from the faculty member was good enough for you. I'm saying this as if your faculty interview is guaranteed to be before your student interview, and know that that's not the case. It is possible for your student interview to happen before your faculty interview. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, you can choose to ask them the same questions, different questions. Either way, you always want to have questions prepared for them. Now, during the student interview would be a really good opportunity to ask questions that are specific to the student experience, and that would be best answered from the student perspective, because your hope is that you will also soon be a student, and therefore these are things you would like to know. So you can ask like what student life on campus is like, if there are any student-led clubs or support groups that you're interested in, you can ask them about those. You can ask them about what financial support for students is like. You can ask them about the intensity of the workload, the curriculum, really anything that is directly related to the student experience that doesn't necessarily cross any more personal boundaries that would be inappropriate for you to cross. Something on this subject in particular that I wanted to mention in my last video, but that I forgot to mention, is that what you don't want to do is ask any questions that have answers that could easily be found through like a Google search, or like just from reading the school or the program's like information page. Don't ask those kinds of questions. It will reflect very badly on you, because all it's going to show them is that you didn't really do any serious research on the program, and it's going to come across as if you are kind of just applying all willy-nilly and you're not really interested in specific aspects of the program itself. So yeah, any questions about the program that you do ask, just make sure that if there are questions that you could just easily search and get the answers to, search and get the answers to them. Like, don't ask them in the interviews. Just don't do it. And that's pretty much it. My next and final video on this topic is going to be about group interviews, which are interesting. I hate group interviews. Thank God I didn't have to do any for my PhD interviews, but I've done group interviews before, just in other settings, and I absolutely despise them. But yeah, group interviews. Stay tuned for that video. So yeah, on that note, thank you for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I truly appreciate it. Leave me a comment down below if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and click that little notification button so you don't miss my next upload, and I will see you in my next one.